All right, everybody. Welcome into the Rise and Hoop podcast. We got episode 2 going. So I think we've already, we're already further along than maybe we initially thought we'd make it. So we're doing good so far. We've got me, Ryan Rasmussen, and Robby McCombs here. Robby, I had some really good Turkish food today.
Nice.
I've had it twice in my life, and both of them were with Danny Holmgren. He's my boss. He's in town right now. We're putting a clinic together down here in San Antonio. And it was just so good. Like the whole time I was eating it, I was even just thinking about the next time that I could eat what I was eating. And but you served in Romania, right?
Yeah.
Is the food similar? Because I've had like within the last couple weeks when I had Turkish food, I had no idea what it was or anything like that.
So one of my cities, Constanța, which everybody knows, obviously. No, I'm just kidding. It's in the eastern.
Knowledge.
Yeah, it's in the eastern part of Romania on the Black Sea. So on the other side of the Black Sea is Turkey. So there's a lot of Muslim and Turkish people that live in Constanța, and I was there for 2 transfers. So had a good amount of Turkish food, like whether it be like kebab, shawarma, things like that. So super good. So I'm proud of you I didn't know San Antonio was known for its Turkish cuisine. So
Yeah, I'm not sure if it is, but yeah, that was
Turkish food, then barbecue in Texas.
Yeah, it's actually number 1 down here.
Yeah.
I had chicken doner is what it was called. Does that ring a bell? Like, did you ever?
Yeah.
Is that like okay?
Yep.
And is it just? I mean, it was just like shredded chicken, like
They probably
really
got
well
it like off, like
seasoned.
it's probably like a rotating thing, and they probably had the big knife. They got it off.
That is what
I
it
can't
looked
think of
like
right
now
the
that you're
words,
saying it.
but yeah. Yeah.
Everyone knows like the typical, like you see at like a Greek restaurant or something that's just spinning around.
Yeah.
They had that at the Burger Supreme in Provo too. Actually, do you remember? Have you been there?
Oh,
Would you?
it's been a while since
been
I've
a minute
like
for
at least
both
10
of us.
years, but
Yeah. When you were saying that, for some reason, I
Yeah.
flashed a picture of Burger
Yeah.
Supreme, and they just have that rotating
Yeah.
behind the counter, and I never got anything off of it, but that's what I remembered.
Yeah. Speaking of food, now that you mentioned, I mean, this is why people are here rather than our BYU talk, obviously.
Of course.
But I guess we could keep this brief. So for dinner tonight, we made like chicken broccoli is what we call it. Essentially, you put it in like a 9x13 pan. You put it in the oven. So Haley, my wife, did most of it, and then she took her 6-month-old Quincy, and I was supposed to put it in the oven. And so it set a 30-minute timer, and then stir it, and then 30 minutes to finish it. So the 30-minute timer first went off, and I opened the oven. I wasn't in there. I was like, "Where did you put the food?" She's like, "What are you talking about?" And I put it in the fridge for 30 minutes. I have no idea. I don't think I've ever done that. So like, I was feeling like an idiot. So I took it out. But it tasted bomb after. So I think it was like it marinated in the fridge for 30 minutes.
There
So,
you go.
I had to save myself after, because then we ended up eating dinner like at 7:45. So,
Your kids are just angry, like cranky.
they were. That's why I blame it. We have a 6-month-old. She's in a sleep regression right now. So I'll blame that on it. But,
Definitely. I was going to definitely
anyways,
bring that up to save you, because I have a 7-month-old. So me and Robbie are both in kind of our
Yeah.
youngest are still pretty young, and yeah, I was telling Robbie earlier, like never once did I ever understand like when people would have like brain fog, things like that, but by the time the second, third kids roll around and that starts
Yeah.
happening, you're like, oh, okay, I get it now. So,
Yeah. So, shout out to all the moms and dads listening to us, or 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th kids that are able to do
Yeah.
that. So, yeah.
we'll get there, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
All
Robbie,
right.
what
That's
do you
all for
think,
this week. So,
Yeah,
until next week.
you wanna, yeah, that concludes our show today. Robbie, what do you think of the win? What are your thoughts?
Man, it's funny. Like I think we were texting. I think it's just some classic reverse psychology, because going into it, like I thought this was BYU's second toughest game of the year. Like BYU obviously was playing really well, came off the big win versus Kansas in a 4-game winning streak, but going on the road to the McKell Center, like arguably the toughest place to play out west, probably along with BYU. Those are probably the 2 toughest places to play. And then just Arizona, I thought was a tough matchup for BYU. They have good bigs with Visar and Owaka. They have Caleb Love, who's just a guard that could really go off, and he did that versus BYU. And then they have good wings. They just have a really good team. I just thought on the road, I thought BYU would keep it competitive, but especially based on the first matchup, which was just earlier this month, BYU lost by 11 points. Excuse me. I didn't think BYU would win, but man, like BYU's offense right now is so impressive, like what they're doing. Like Kevin, like the point guard play from Demon and Dallin Hall, just those have a really good handle on the offense. Like Yegor had some turnovers, but Dallin's getting so comfortable right now. Like BYU's, their spacing is good. Richie Saunders is playing like a first team all Big 12 player. Kaba's playing really well. Like super impressed. I just didn't think BYU would win the game. The fact that they won the game, we talked about BYU won the game, that opens up the possibilities. Like, okay, BYU could start thinking about 8, 7, even like a 6 seed, depending on BYU's finish. So, just so impressed in that environment. The BYU just how good they looked. Like this team looks good.
I'm with you. Yeah, watching it was surreal watching the game. I compared watching the Kansas game to, I went to the Alamo Bowl and just kind of watching that game, how we just slaughtered Colorado when they've got the Heisman winner and they've got Shedeur Sanders, who's like projected top quarterback pick in the draft. Right.
Yeah.
You go into that game thinking, okay, this is going to be tough. Like BYU's totally capable of winning, but also when you're playing against athletes like that, they have a really good game and the best team can get shredded, right? Kind of felt so, but then BYU just eviscerates them start to finish. It's not a contest. Yeah. Kansas kind of ended up feeling like when I was watching that game, it felt unreal too. Like I thought, this feels unreal, like doesn't feel real. Ranked Kansas in the Marriott Center, blue blood at home, and we're just eviscerate. Like it's no contest, right? By the second half, the first 5 minutes of the second half, you're like, okay, we still have the same energy. We're still hitting shots. We're still playing defense. Like it's game over. This game, although it still felt unreal because it just felt like we couldn't miss. It felt like the offense could not be stopped.
Yeah,
we could not really stop them. But I mean, I would even say down the stretch, we had a good cushion. And that's kind of even why, right, kind of going back to the home game against Arizona, we never built up a cushion. It felt like they would kind of surge, and we were just continually trying to catch up to them, and we did for that first 30 minutes. This game, it was a lot of like back and forth. The teams were trading the lead back and forth, and then BYU just built up that I think it was a 5-point cushion before the Nell fouled 3, something like that. But but it gave us enough I'm not trying to rag on Nell by any means whatsoever, more just trying to frame it for myself. But like just with time running out, less than 2 minutes on the clock, or about a minute on the clock, I think it was, BYU had those points to give you that buffer so that the whole, like the Kevin Love or Caleb Love, his skill and his incredible playmaking and shot making isn't, you're accounting for that, right? You're giving yourself a little buffer to still have a chance to win.
Yeah. I think obviously it was an offensive game, but the one point I think defensively that stuck out to me was turnovers and what BYU was able to do off of those turnovers. Because both teams, couldn't really stop each other. Both shot over 50% from the field, over 40% from 3. But the turnover battle, BYU won the turnover battle 14-9. So even in the second half, like at the beginning of the second half, when Arizona was really hitting the shots, grabbing the offensive rebounds, BYU couldn't stop them. There was times when BYU would turn them over. So that was kind of what was able to break it up a little bit. But I thought that one of the key things off those turnovers, BYU had 22 points off turnovers versus Arizona's 10s. Versus 10 points off turnovers. And BYU, just when they get in transition and then when they play fast and free, like that opened up a lot of points just for BYU offensively. I think one big thing that stuck out to me from this game and kind of this win streak is it just BYU's depth and how they keep going to it, and they're going to it even deeper. Because oftentimes coaches, as you get deeper in the season, it's typical that you will shorten your rotations. Like coaches, they're feeling them
Right.
the rotations out earlier in the year. As you get to the end of the season, there's fewer games, and those games become even more important at the end because you have fewer opportunities to improve your resume. So naturally, most coaches will shorten their rotation, which makes sense. BYU, the last like 5-6 games, has lengthened their rotation. Like Trey Stewart, really for the first 2/3 of the season, wasn't a factor at all. The last 6 games, he's played consistent minutes and played really well. Like when BYU needs kind of a stop defensively, he comes in. He's last 5 games, he's attempted 2 threes every game. He's made 5 of them, so he's shooting 50% from three his last 5 games. So just his energy and his athleticism defensively, and he's giving you a little spark offensively. And then Bošković too, just giving you that stretch five. Like he wasn't really playing at all the first 2/3 of the season, but he was really big, sealed that West Virginia win for BYU. He's got minutes the last few games, so when things maybe offense maybe gets a little sticky with Kaba or Fuchs, BYU feels like they need more floor spacing, they bring in Mihailo. So really BYU has gone to like from like 8-9ish man rotation to like a 10 or 11 man rotation, which is very uncommon. Usually you see that end of the year, like, okay, things are wrong and coaches are trying to figure things out. So it's not only BYU's going deeper, but Kevin Young knows, I feel like he's pressing the buttons at exactly the right time. So like when you need like spark from Trey Stewart, he brings Trey Stewart off the bench. When you need a couple point baskets from Dawson Baker, like Dawson Baker made 3 buckets in the Arizona game. Like Cannon Catchings has been up and down, but he knew when to bring in Cannon Catchings this last game, scored 14 points. So tactically, Kevin Young is doing really well, knowing how to press the buttons. But to me, from the outside, it also seems like him and the coaching staff mentally are preparing the guys really well. And some of the guys have talked about that. I think Kevin Young and his staff are just do a really good job of just however they frame it to getting them ready. It's like, hey, maybe you're not getting the role you're supposed to, but where things are starting to click, and he gets them in a mindset from when they do come in, maybe they're not playing 15, 20 minutes a night. Some of those guys are maybe playing 8 to 10 minutes a night. They're ready, and Kevin Young knows exactly when to press the buttons. Like those are the 3 things in the rotations that are super impressive to me. Like, one, BYU is going deeper, which is a differentiator from them at this time of year. Once teams starting getting more tired, BYU, that could mean BYU is more fresh. And then 2, tactically, how Kevin Young's able to know exactly when to put in the right guy. And then 3, the guys are buying into their role, which is super good to see because the beginning of the year is just Kevin Young, the players are just figuring things out. But those 3 things, super impressive for BYU is able to handle the rotations, and that's going to be that's a differentiator from them in the Big 12 right now. BYU is the deepest team, honestly, in the Big 12, and it's showing and making them one of the top teams in the league.
I'm completely with you. I like that you brought that up. I was looking at the box score, and yeah, it's crazy to see. You know, you could look at BYU's box score, and it's running 6 players deep outside the starting 5, and
Yeah.
you even just compare it to Arizona's, and they've got 3
Yeah.
people that 3 players that came off the bench, right? So I mean, it's a pretty big difference, and of that, yeah, 9 of our guys got double-digit minutes. So Mikhailo and Dawson played 5 and 8 minutes each, but everyone else, it's not just like, there's a few guys that he threw in for Trey Stewart for 2 minutes at the end of the half. No, now it's Trey Stewart for like 15 minutes, playing real minutes in the game, like you said, even getting some making, some shots up, making an impact. So.
Yeah. And even like Dawson's 8 minutes, like Dawson was 3 for 3 from the field, hit a big 3 in the first half. So even like the minutes guys do come in, they're impactful. So it's like Kevin, he's figuring out the magic sauce right now, when to bring in guys. And that's been very impressive and one of the BYU's like superpowers right now.
100%. When you were even talking about like the mentality that takes, like, like you bring up Cannon Catchings, like doesn't have a good game against Kansas, especially like if you're a young kid, like you'd be pretty bummed from that. Like that's a tough, like you get in, you kind of have some defensive lapses, you get yanked, you're not, and then Trey Stewart's getting the rest of your minutes in a lot of ways for the rest of that game, just in terms of like who's where the bench minutes coming from. And then he turns it around, he's sticking with it, and then he comes out and has a great game and is, Kevin Young even talked about it after the game, right? Saying, admittedly, that he's had him on a shorter leash, right? Like he's expecting a lot from him, and then called out specifically when this kid is when he's making his shots, when he's playing for us and like executing, he said to himself, like, this team ceiling, it completely transforms our ceiling. And I think that's kind of when, how do you win a game like this? You have some of those guys. You have a Baker come off the bench and go 3 for 3. You have Cannon Catchings shoot really well, 4 of 6, I think, from 3 on the night.
Yeah.
So, you get some of those guys that are comfortable to say, hey, maybe I'm not starting, maybe I'm not getting 20-something minutes, but when I'm on the court, I know what the game plan is. I know what what's being asked of me, and I'm going to make that happen. So I thought that was pretty awesome, and I'm with you. I think that's like, you can tell he's got the team bought in, and then he's actually putting the guys in at the right time too. So it's not just like putting the right guys in or just having the mentality. You do both of those things colliding is how you get, like a big win like this.
Yeah. So my 3-year-old just came in. It's way past her bedtime, 9:20 here Pacific, but we're rolling with it. So she might just be in here for a while.
It happens. We've been there.
Yeah. But I think those are my main takeaways for the Arizona game. I know we're a couple people will be listening to this probably on a Tuesday, so it's had some time to marinate a little bit. But I guess what this means kind of moving forward, I mean, so BYU, if you take like their last 4 wins, like 3 of them are quad 1 wins, and those 3 quad 1 wins are against teams that will be in the tournament. And your 4th win against Kansas State at the time was a quad 2 win. Kansas State, they're in a little bit of funk right now, but at the time that was a team that arguably the hottest team in college basketball. They had won 6 games in a row. They had beaten Kansas, they'd beaten Arizona, they'd beaten Iowa State, really good teams. So BYU, those 4 BYU wins have been really good. So the season ended today. BYU's probably anywhere between like a 7 to 10 seed, which like after that Cincinnati loss like 2 weeks ago, BYU was firmly on the bubble, kind of right that last team in, last 4 in, first 4 out territory. And now BYU, like they have the chance of these last 4 games. I think they'll be favored in 3 of them. If they go 3-1, I think they have a good chance to be like a 7 seed. If they could go 4-0, like they beat the Iowa State game, there's a chance I think they could be a 6 seed, and depending what they do in the Big 12 tournament. So, which is exactly, you're playing your best ball this time of year. Like, and those matchups are so important. Like if you're a 6 or 7 seed, you could be looking at a game versus like Nebraska, whereas if you're like in like maybe that 9 to 11 seed, you're thinking of like a team like Clemson who's in the top 15, or a team like Memphis who's a lot of talent. So like those seedings makes all the difference, and it can allow you to get to stack those type of wins, to use a Kevin Young type of term.
There we go. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if BYU used to finish 4-0, we would have the 4 seed in the Big 12 tournament at this point, right?
Yeah, which gives you the double bye.
Iowa State did lose. Iowa State did lose to Houston, so we're just a game back there. And then, with the head-to-head, basically, if you can win out and win that game, like you're saying, that puts you in as you're kind of saying, depending on what happens in the Big 12 tournament, you're hopefully guaranteeing yourself getting that top 4 seed, that you're going to have another highly competitive opponent in your matchup for the tournament. Then it's kind of nice. I mean, if you win that game, you're just rolling into a game against, Texas Tech, Arizona, Houston, right? Those are the types of teams that are on your schedule to do nothing but boost you, right? Kind of like we talked about last week. Losing this game against Arizona would not have hurt BYU, but it can elevate, and we're getting to see that now. And then, if you can just kind of keep those opponents at a higher quality as the season starts to go down the stretch, you're kind of limiting your downside and just exposed to all the upside. When you look at the way, that's why the WCC changed their tournament into that crazy multi-level structure. I saw on Twitter, I think it's the Sun Belt. I can't remember, but there's a conference tournament now that runs from Tuesday all the way to Monday, because it's literally it's 2 games at a time, and they just give every team gets one, all the way back from the top 2 teams. It just goes 2 teams by 2 teams. So, because they're trying to do that same thing, right?
Speaking of conference tournaments, I think I was watching Big Ten Network earlier. So the Big Ten Network has 18. Big Ten is 18 teams, but only 15 of them make the conference tournament. So there was a graphic. They were show what teams were on the Big Ten tournament bowl. you imagine? Like,
That's
it's like,
low-key
can you imagine if
savage.
you're like a diehard Northwestern fan, and you're like, get up in the morning, and be like, oh, are we gonna get? Who did Nebraska win? Did Iowa win last night? Are we gonna get in the tournament? Are we gonna sneak it as the 15th seed? It's like different type, like last two in, first two out. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, there's bubble watch for your conference
Big Ten,
tournament.
yeah, first two in, first two out. Looking at the metrics, looking at the tiebreaker scenarios. You got to be a real sicko if you're going to those teams to like, be doing those.
That's a pure sicko move.
I was like, they're just showing bubble watch for the Big Ten tournament. It's like, man, brutal.
That is brutal. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like the Big 12.
I'm glad we don't do
in
this
terms of-
podcast and we're not talking 20 minutes about BYU being on the Big 12 tournament bubble. Cause,
Yeah, that would be brutal.
yeah.
I think the Big 12 nailed it in terms of like the bye and the double bye structure is really, I love that.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome.
Yeah, so 9 through 16 play the first Tuesday, then so 5 through 8 get a first bye, and then 1 through 4 get the double bye. So I think it's a good setup. It rewards teams without just being like just some weirdo type bracket. Like, it makes logical sense.
Yeah, I'll definitely. Have
Although
to go look
low
at that
key
Big
though,
10
a 14
bracket.
team tournament with like having the Big 10 bracketology, Big 12 bracketology though would
That could be kind of cool.
being on the 13-14 cut line.
I love it. I love the random cutoff at 15 too. Like not 16.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Seriously,
Why didn't you do
gotta be
16?
15.
Why didn't you do 16 teams? Like 16 makes a literal perfect bracket. So now their bracket, like the first day, let's talk about the Big Ten tournament. They have like 10 through 15 like on the first day, and they play the winner. I think of like 8 through 9. So yeah, that's even the stupidest part. Like, why would you cut your tournament off?
That
at
was the
15
first thing I
teams?
caught. Yeah, when you said
Why would
15,
you?
I was like,
No, I thought it was a typo. It's literally 15 teams in the Big Ten tournament. Like, why wouldn't you?
this is a flashback to our trip to Nebraska when we were breaking down with the Phil Steele magazine for that season. I
Yeah.
think we broke down the MAC special teams leader,
Yeah.
the returning punters and kickers and
Yeah, there's some good ones in there. This will be good for the algorithm, the SEO for like people that are looking at Big Ten
we got to
tournaments.
expand our reach. Yeah,
Yeah,
Big
you know.
Ten, throw in the MAC, Phil Steele. These are all good buzzwords, right? For what we're doing.
Yep, exactly.
Before we moved on from the Arizona game, I did want to get what were your thoughts on the foul at the end of the game on Richie? What did you think of that, Robbie?
I mean, in real time, I didn't think it was a foul. It was just funny because I've kind of last couple weeks been beating the drum of like Tony Padilla. Because I think it's just, and people could think what they want. Like honestly, like fans don't notice the difference between refs. Like honestly, I don't think we've noticed Tony Padilla because people can actually notice a difference. It's because we've been trained, people like former players and coaches have mentioned him specifically. So us as fans, when we see him, it's confirmation bias. Like when he makes an extra call or make a call you don't agree with, like, oh, Tony Padilla is a terrible ref. And maybe he does call more fouls than normal, but refs have different styles. There's lots of refs that call more than normal. There's lots of refs that come back. We've just happened to pin it at Tony Padilla because a few people on Twitter have said that. Like, I've never noticed a difference between, like, I've never thought about an individual ref. So I kind of trolled people before. It was like people were saying Tony Padilla hates BYU, and I said, Ian said before, Tony Padilla doesn't hate BYU, and then of course he makes the call that makes BYU win it. So, but I mean, it did. There was
more
replay
confirmation bias.
Yeah, exactly. But there was like the angles. Like I feel like I'm a pretty neutral person. Like I think I could see, like, obviously a big BYU fan, but I could see both sides, I feel like, just in general. But I think it was a hip check on Trey Townsend. Like Richie went over, and Richie was on BYU Sports Nation today. And of course, Richie's going to say it was a foul, but he essentially said it was a foul. But Trey Townsend like did put his hip out. So like, I think it would have been a fine no call.
Like by definition, it's a foul.
Yeah,
but,
it was a foul.
Like
I know BYU fans are saying like it kind of balances out. Like maybe it was like there was the one on Kaba before. Like I didn't have the angle of the other side though. Maybe Kaba got body just from our TV angle. It looked like he went straight up, but I mean,
Right.
who's to say? I can't
you're not
say
getting
that
the full
for sure. But I think
kind of like the foul on Richie was like from the TV angle, it looked like an egregious, like I was in shock kind of thing,
Yeah,
like seeing
I was
it
like,
live. Like I was
when
like,
he missed it, I was like,
oh,
crap, we lost, and the whistle. I was
yeah.
like, whew.
And then the whistle came in, and I was like,
Yeah.
you're just like, I don't care,
Yeah.
I'll take it. But
Yeah.
it didn't
It was-
look like anything. The same way that
Yeah.
it kind of looked like before. I thought Keba was getting a rough call, but
Yeah.
again, you're not getting that angle.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I felt
Yeah,
like.
I mean, a lot of summers
there
to the
was
Utah
some
football game,
consistency.
honestly, it's like, oh, refs made a terrible call, and then there was the camera angles on both. I think the Utah one was more clearly a penalty. If you have to call that, whereas this one, I think it was a foul, but if you didn't call it, it wouldn't have been egregious if they didn't call it. I don't think.
100%. I feel like it was consistent with how I felt like the reffing in that game, like kind of even when I mentioned the back and forth, I felt like the flow of the game was awesome. And I felt like the refs overall did great. Like, I didn't feel like there was too many, I don't know, it felt like the game was moving. I felt like the reffing in this season in the conference has been pretty good. I feel like it's better than last year in our games, at least.
Like, honestly, I think the takeover from BYU fans, like, the refs were terrible. They called too much. And they did maybe were a little bit touchy at the beginning, but honestly, I think that worked in BYU's favor. That really, I thought, opened up the game in the second half. Like, especially beginning of the second half, there's fewer fouls because one of BYU's weaknesses this season when they're playing really physical teams that will like put their hands on Jaeger coming off a pick and roll, or BYU, they set Richie off a screen, guys will hand them. At the beginning, they were calling those. I thought one of the reasons the game was so high scoring because the refs set the tone at the beginning of the game. It's like, hey, we're going to call all that handsy stuff. And then it opened up like free-flowing offense on both sides, which I thought made for an entertaining watch. And at the end of the game, there's a lot of fouls called, and you could say maybe they should or should not have been called. But honestly, I think that worked in BYU's favor because BYU, Kevin Young, is used to NBA free-flowing, spacing. And with the way that the tone was set early, it's like, hey, we're going to call that stuff. Then stuff that players were doing at the beginning, they were called fouls. They weren't doing those things of putting their hands on players. And I thought, honestly, like it worked in both teams' advantage because it really opened up the offense and made for a really exciting watch.
Yeah, that's how I felt. Like even as the game just kept going back and forth in the second half, I'm like, maybe not stressed, but I'm like, this is such a big opportunity. Like we need to win. I didn't feel like we needed to win, so maybe I was more able to just like, I really got caught up in just, this game is awesome. Like this is just an awesome college basketball game. Mm-hmm. Of course, wanting BYU to win, but it was just like, it truly was so entertaining. And I even thought like, I've enjoyed the flow of play in general more this season. It feels like it doesn't feel like the number at the end of the game has been high. Like I feel like last year we had a lot of games where 10 minutes, 12 minutes left in the second half, shooting free throws the rest of the way, like things like that. I don't feel like we've run into that as much. I can't speak to like the college landscape at a whole, but I'm with you. I think like, that's a great point that even, hey, if the refs kind of set the tone early, that can actually just make for a much more enjoyable game the rest of the way. So I like that.
Yeah. Should we move to Arizona State, I guess? Obviously, Arizona State wins it. What's interesting about this game, Arizona State, they're at the bottom of the Big 12. They're like second to last, third to last place.
But they're above Colorado.
Yeah.
who is definitely at the bottom.
Who is last place. So if there was...
They did just double their win total, though.
Yeah, they beat Baylor.
By beating Baylor. So.
Yeah, before it looked like Kansas is going to beat them. But Arizona State, they've had a really rough year. Like did a good non-conference. But I mean, Bobby Hurley, he could be fired after this year. Like they have a lot of talent. Isn't it interesting? Before they won at Kansas State on Sunday, which was a big upset. They were coming off they were at a 6-game losing streak. Right before the Kansas State game, their leading scorer BJ Freeman, guard, they announced like they kicked him off the team. So you're like, it's like, wow, they're gonna get smoked. But then they beat down Kansas State on the road. Granted, Kansas State was without Coleman Hawkins, arguably their best player, but still on the road. So it could be a team that's maybe, hey, like, I don't know what BJ Freeman did, but maybe he was kind of a locker room cancer or whatever. They got him out. But other thing to watch,
maybe
like
Arizona State is just trying to get off that Big 12 bubble. You know, they're going to get a surge to.
Yeah, exactly. They're on the
14-15
cut line. They're trying to make a surge. The last team in, first team out.
Anyway, you're saying.
Yeah, but also like at the end again, they're arguably their best player, Jaden Quaintance, who's like their star freshman center. He went out of the game on crutches. So if he's not available for BYU, honestly, I think they're toast. Like, I think BYU beats them honestly handily, which is how BYU's playing. Maybe Kansas State, maybe they found a little bit that last game. It's at home. I think there's going to be a ton of BYU fans there in Tempe. Like, Arizona, it's a hard place for opposing fans because those Arizona fans buy that. But there's going to be a ton of BYU fans Wednesday night at the Arizona State game. Wednesday night, probably like a big youth night for a lot of teams. You'll get the Queen Creek, Third Ward young men's group going there. You'll get the Gilbert YSA ward probably going on a speed dating type night. You'll get those types of things. You'll get Garrett McClintock with his 3 kids going there. But I mean, one thing that's interesting, I guess, if we want to talk about the game a little bit, these are the teams that shoot the most threes in the Big 12. Like BYU, if you're going on attempts, 3-point attempts is a percentage of your total attempts. Like BYU, 49% of their attempts come from 3. Arizona State's like 45%. So these teams shoot the ball a lot. They have good shooters. BYU's like top 3 in 3-point percentage in the Big 12. Arizona State's 5th. So that's the one thing you got to guard with Arizona State. They have a couple good shooters. BYU's got to guard the 3-point line, which BYU's preference is kind of pack the paint and force teams subpar shooters to shoot. But BYU's going to have to really guard the 3-point line. So that's kind of the wild card of this game. Arizona State's that has struggled this year, but they do shoot a lot of threes. And if you shoot a lot of threes, there's a lot of variance in that shot. So if you make a lot, they could pull the upset. But if they're not having a great shot, it could be a game BYU wins by 20 points going away. So I think with Arizona State, especially if Jaden Quaintance, their star big, isn't playing, I think they're toast. I think BYU wins by double digits. But again, they shoot a lot of threes. That's the variance. But I think BYU wins comfortably. And even though Arizona State's not good, it's kind of a bonus quad 1 type of game, which would be nice, just another little notch for BYU to add on the resume.
They're high enough in net that it's quad 1.
Yeah, so they're 60 in net, and on the road, top 75 teams.
Yeah, top 75.
So they'll stay in quad 1 the whole year, even if they lost the rest of their games.
Right. That's surprising. I wouldn't have expected. I didn't know that they were that high up, so that's awesome. Well, yeah, I mean that's a benefit, right? That's a big benefit of Big 12 because the second to worst team in our league is still a quad 1 win.
Yeah.
Whereas the second to worst team when we were in the WCC was
332nd in net. If you lose, like you're not going to make the tournament for the next 3 years.
A Q5 loss.
Yeah, it's a Q5 loss. You're disqualified for next year's tournament because it's so embarrassing.
I love it. What do you think? What's your prediction like in terms of like margin of victory? You think? I know you're saying it could go one way or the other.
Yeah.
What's your pick?
Yeah. So Ken Palm favors BYU by 2. So I'm going, if Quaintance, he went out of the game in crutches, so maybe he'll play. But I'm going to the assumption if he doesn't play, I think BYU wins like 87-73 type of game. Like Arizona State probably hit some threes late to make the score, but I think BYU wins comfortably. Arizona State's just kind of a mess right now again. Maybe they found something with that Kansas State game, but I think they're just a mess right now. BYU's just on fire. I think BYU wins comfortably.
I like it. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a win as well. This is kind of one of those times where you do look at that and you kind of think back-to-back huge wins. Is there a letdown coming up? Are we going to overlook, the game at Arizona State, thinking about, the upcoming games, West Virginia, Iowa State, better teams? I don't think so. I think, again, just kind of bring it back to Kevin Young. Like, I was even thinking on the way, I was listening to that same Richie Saunders interview on Sports Nation where he talked about, he was just saying he's just so grateful for Kevin Young and for the team and how the team has stuck together, even from, bad losses at Providence, like just getting smoked at Houston, getting smoked, right? And like that team had no idea where they'd be right now, but it's really, I mean, me and you've played plenty of intramural games together and pickup games together where like, holding each other to 0-0 in a pickup game at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
Like you just
Our
like,
defense
it's
was
really
on point.
Yeah. But it's really easy to like, you just get smoked in a game and you're kind of like, oh, we suck. Like we're not good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And And so it's cool, like he's talking about like so when he was mentioning that, I kind of came back again. I like with Kevin Young's NBA background, I thought in the NBA you're so used to losing games. You lose so many games. There's so many games that you
that's a good
lose.
point.
The best teams are losing 20 to 30 games a year, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like comes with you're just like, yeah, a loss in the NBA is not going to phase you. In the
a good point.
playoffs, it's a best of 7. Like you're gonna lose games in the playoffs and keep moving forward. Like, so I was kind of thinking, I was thinking maybe that's
a
another
really good
thing that
point.
he's brought, right? Kind of from the NBA, that when you're coaching in high school and college, like the games matter a lot more than like a regular season or a playoff NBA game, because you can have bad games at any night in the NBA and it really isn't gonna like tank your season or anything. So that's kind of
a
something
really
I was
good point.
thinking.
Especially like with BYU, just our fan psyche. We're used to so much of our history being in not top tier leagues. Like the Mountain West had a lot of really good years. Even it was a solid league, but it's not with the Big 12 and the WCC. The 12 years BYU was in had a lot of bottom feeders. So we were used to, if you lost like a couple WCC games, especially those bottom teams, like you were like, man, we're cooked.
You literally had like tournament hope ending loss. Like you could sink your season on a loss potentially.
Yeah, like that was the fan psyche of us, our fathers' fathers for generations. And now it's like Arizona lost 5 games in non-conference and now they're like projected to be a top 3 seed. Like BYU, they had a 3-game losing streak and now we're talking about, hey, like this, like people talk about, hey, this is like could be a Sweet 16 type of team. So I think that like, Kevin Young, like he said, it's like, yeah, NBA, you're going to lose a lot. So he's like, yeah, this comes to the territory. And it's interesting to go like a point further in that. Like we've seen a lot of coaches leave college basketball. Like that Tony Bennett, like left Virginia right before the season started. Like Mike Krzyzewski retired a few years ago. Like other high profile coaches have left college basketball, just the way college basketball is trending, the NIL landscape. And Kevin Young has said like, yeah, this is exactly what I'm used to operating in, like playing guys, like guys worrying about their salaries, like minutes and everything. And to tie it to your point
egos.
of like, yeah, exactly. There's more ego now with money tied to stuff, not just playing for the name on the front of your jersey. You're playing for your paycheck and for the next paycheck. Hey, if I do good this year, then I'm gonna get more money next year, either from my current team or in the transfer portal or whatever. So he's used to doing that. And then you add in like, yeah, the way the NBA works of losing is not a big deal. It's like that's just another point. It's just like how he's just in his element in this college basketball world where most college coaches, they're just trying to do something new. It's like Kevin Young's like, yeah, this is what I've done the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, especially like after that 3-game losing streak to start, I remember kind of thinking, like talking with fans, friends, people at church, like, do we need to change the offense? Like, do we just need to start playing like simple offense? And because like the offense looked really clunky. Like there was a lot of different things, right? Where you're kind of like,
yeah, the Utah game, it was
so
just
obvious.
It was just hard. It was just nothing was easy.
Yeah, but it's obvious, like you said, like Kevin Young is like, he's in his bag, he's in his element in terms of like, no, I'm going to stick with this. We're going to figure it out. Yeah. And it's just cool seeing again, like it continues to, the team is proving that like he knows what he's doing. He's even admitted like the learning curve, how tough it is to win in college. Like he's talked about like things that he underestimated. But you can tell that at the same time, there's some really good things that he's brought in that have translated, whether it's like intentional or not, but just being through, like you were joking about, G League games all the way up to, like G League coaches probably care way more about losing than like an NBA coach, right? Like those losses are more probably hard on a G League coach where he's like, I'm trying to show that I know how to coach guys and get wins, right? Versus in the NBA, you are, but it's more like they're looking at the entirety of your season, your playoff run, who you're doing it with. So it's just, he's kind of had such a variety of experience in the pros from the G League to the NBA that it's like, it's just cool seeing like he's very unfazed. The outside chatter I don't think it really gets to him. And he's some of the team, we do have some vets that I think that helps, like Dallin, Richie, Mag, Nell. Like you've got some veterans, whether they were at BYU or not this entire time. That helps, right? Guys saying, hey, let's stick together, let's keep things going. but like ultimately your coach is the one that's pulling that. And so I only mention that thinking, I think like you said, our fan psyche, it's easy to think this is a trap game. We're going to lose. We're going to we've been hot. Now we're going to go lose to the worst team in our conference and torpedo us back to the first four in or whatever, or like last four in. The cool thing is, even if we did lose, it's not going to torpedo us in that kind of a way necessarily. But I also ultimately, my main point is that it just feels like the team is very steady and consistent right now. Yeah. And so I feel like we know what we're going to get. I think, like you said, I feel like we'll score 80. Like we'll definitely be like in that upper area. We've been hitting those numbers pretty consistently recently. And I have a hard time thinking that ASU would score that many on us. I don't think that they'd get into the 80s. Like you said, maybe low 70s, high 60s. So I'm with you. I feel like it's a good game that we'll be able to take care of business on.
Yeah.
Robby, I know you mentioned too. So there's news today that Utah fired Craig Smith, which I thought was pretty crazy. But I know you had said that you kind of had some insights how that could. I mean, obviously it affects us as our rival, but also just as another member in the conference. That even we've kind of struggled when we played him the last couple of years, right? Like he's put up a bigger fight than most.
Yeah, I mean, the last two times BYU played him, he beat us this year, obviously, and then last year when BYU went there. So, I mean, I think the reason Utah fired him, I think there's just no juice really in the program. Like, I think he should have. I thought he was a year away. Like they exceeded expectations this year. Like they're a mid-tier Big 12 team, but they just have their NIL support's terrible. So I think they're going to try to get a coach, go back to the past, reinvigorate some of the old money. But the reason that we don't need to talk about Utah's coaching search, whatever. But I think there is some ways it is applicable to BYU. And like the first thing fans I saw were asking me or whatever is like, hey, is Chris Burgess, like he's immediately going to be a top candidate. And I'll explain why, but I would be surprised if Chris Burgess took the Utah job. And like my first two reasons are kind of just me using my logic, and then two, just kind of other ones are stuff I've heard. So reason I'd be surprised, it's like one, like the terms he left on, like he's been kind of bouncing back and forth. I think a lot of people in that administration and some of the boosters, I think he left a sour taste in the mouth by going back to BYU for a second time. When he was on the Utah staff, I think they saw it as like a parallel job. It's like, you're going to our rival. So there's that. But even say if they do come around and want to hire Chris Burgess, like if I'm Chris Burgess, and I'm not Chris Burgess, but if I was Chris Burgess, like if I'm thinking like he could have a really good chance to be the next BYU head coach if Kevin Young decides to go to the NBA. Like, I don't know what Kevin Young's thinking. Maybe he's a BYU lifer, but it could be something. Maybe he kills it the next 3 years at BYU, so he gets to Final Four, 2 Final Fours, and he's like, "Hey, I've done this college thing. I'm gonna go back to the NBA, back to like the top of the basketball world." And if that happened, if Chris Burgess was an assistant on the BYU staff during that run, like BYU's gonna hire an LDS head coach. I know other programs have non-LDS head coaches, but for the men's basketball team and the football team, like the two programs that are face of the athletic program, that's going to be an LDS head coach. And Chris Burgess would be, if BYU has that type of run where they're at the top of the college basketball landscape, Chris Burgess arguably would be like the top candidate. And I think it's pretty clear at that point, BYU is a way better job just with the NI, with the resources BYU has, with the commitment donors have made to it, the fan support. Whereas if he goes to Utah, I think that he has no chance ever. I don't think he would ever get the BYU job. So I think one, I don't know if he would be a candidate, but even if he was, it's like, hey, if I stick around BYU for 3 years, like Utah, it's like if you took the Utah job, it's like it's a power conference job. Like those jobs are hard to come by. Like it'd be the pinnacle. He'd probably have to take it if they offered to him. But at the same time, it's like, okay, like the NIL support wasn't good under Craig Smith. Like, is he really going to be able to reinvigorate it? He can almost torpedo his career in some ways. If he stayed with BYU, it's like, hey, I mean, I'm the top LDS assistant on the staff. I could ride that wave to replace Kevin Young down the road. And also, like, I think Utah, I think they have good history. Like, they made national championship in the 90s. Like, Andrew Bogut just 20 years ago was the national player of the year. Like, even the last 10 years, they have some good NBA players. They have Kyle Kuzma, they have Jakob Poeltl, they've had DeLon Wright, but which is even more embarrassing with that fan support. Even with all that, BYU honestly doesn't have Utah basketball's history. Like, in the last 25 years, we really don't. They made a national title game. They have a Wooden Award winner. BYU does too, but both teams have it. Utah's had way more NBA draft picks, and their fans still don't give a rip about their program. So honestly, if their football program goes through what the basketball program does, like their basketball program has way more. Like not way more. It has more history, I think, than their football program. The football program has had a couple undefeated seasons, but the basketball with like National Player of the Year, almost winning a national championship. What's to say their football program can't be where their basketball program is in terms of fan support in the next 5 years if they go on this run where they don't care about the Big 12. But that's a side piece. But I think Utah, they'll go after Alex Jensen versus the NBA assistant. I think a couple of years ago he was a hot name for NBA head coach, but I think he'll probably get the first call. They'll make him say no. And maybe if not, they'll try to go Andre Miller, a former Utah great. I think they just want to get somebody that reinvigorates some of that old money that remembers the glory days of Utah basketball and open their pocketbooks. So, I mean, not going to go down that road, but as it pertains to BYU, I would be surprised based on that and just things I've heard if Chris Burgess took the job. And then second, I think there's players on Utah's roster that have ties to BYU, like Jake Walling. He was a BYU commit, and then after his mission, flipped to Utah. He's been there 2 years. Keanu Doss, who's a sophomore on the roster, BYU recruited him. He took an official visit. He's there right now. I wouldn't be surprised. Like Jake Walling, he's had a good year this year. He's a 6'10" guy, shoots 37% from three. I mean, he grew up a diehard BYU fan, big BYU family. Went to Timpview High School. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if I think he'd be very interested in BYU. I think it's still a ways away. BYU has to figure out what they're doing with their roster. Like, one is, do they have a scholarship for Jake? And two, would Jake be fine if BYU decided he'd probably be like 8th or 9th guy in the rotation, which I think would be awesome for him. Like 6'10" guys that shoot don't come around very awesome. He's a starter on a Big 12 team. He could play the 3, he could play the 4. I think he's due for another jump next year. So I would like a guy like Jake Walling on the roster, big BYU guy, 6'10" guy that could shoot. He could defend multiple positions. Like, again, it's going to depend on your roster, what you have coming back, what you want to add. He's not going to be like, this is our number one chance we're going to add. But if you want to add, and BYU's shown Kevin Young, hey, he's the pitch they can make, hey, we go deep in our bench. We go 10, 11 guys. Maybe you'll be the 8th guy. You come in your junior year and your senior year. And you could be part of a national title contender this year and next year. I think compelling to him as a BYU guy, I think he would take that. BYU has the NIL money to pay him. I think it just matters if BYU makes that offer. And obviously Jake's got to enter the portal, but if there's a coaching change, I wouldn't be surprised if it happens. So those are the two things that I'm watching. Like Burgess, like I'd be surprised if he goes. And then Jake Walling, like what happens to him, I think he'd be a great utility guy on the bench. Honestly, the third thing too, like Colin Chandler. So Colin Chandler's at Utah. Right. Or, sorry, he's at Kentucky right now. He has been getting minutes at Kentucky due to injuries. Like Kentucky's had a lot of injuries in the backcourt, so it's kind of forced Colin Chandler into there. And I don't want to start any rumors. I have no insight if Colin Chandler is going to think of transferring.
Pure speculation right here.
Yeah, so not breaking any news. I want to make that clear. But if he entered the transfer portal, like it would obviously BYU Utah would be of the top of the list. He grew up a Utah fan, obviously was committed to BYU, but he followed Pope to Provo. But if he entered, like depending on the staff is hired, like he would have really like if Craig Smith was still at Utah, Craig Smith was the one that recruited him to Utah.
Yeah,
and Chris
connection.
But to BYU, like Chris Burgess also recruited him. So like he was committed to BYU for 2 years. Chris Burgess, an assistant of the BYU staff, recruited him. Like that puts that kind of Utah becomes less of an option because he has fewer connections there. Maybe he goes to Utah because he's like, hey, you're going to start because our team sucks and you play a lot. And maybe he wants to play a lot. But those are kind of the three. That's the reason we brought up the Utah job. Just not talk about the Utah job because the connections it could have. Like Chris Burgess, I'd be surprised. Jake Walliam, I'd keep my eye on that if he enters the transfer portal. And then pure speculation, if Colin Chandler does, like maybe with Craig Smith gone, maybe that opens the door to make BYU an even better option versus Utah if it came down to that. So just a couple of thoughts. The news came out earlier today that I was thinking about that job.
Nice. So essentially just, weakening. Utah's in a bit of a weaker position from that, which could help us either. I mean, like, getting Kenta was awesome. Like, if we can add another really good player from them, that's always a good thing from wherever.
And I guess the fourth, I didn't even mention, I tweeted out, they have a missionary, Jackson Johnson, out. He was a 4-star forward, 2024 class. So he's just been his first year in his mission. So he's still like a couple years away from coming. But it was down to BYU and Utah for him. He grew up a diehard Utah fan. He liked BYU a lot, but honestly, he loved Burgess and he loved Craig Smith. And Craig Smith's gone, you got Burgess on your staff. So honestly, if that's the I'm watching, he comes on a mission, I think BYU's got a good chance for him to come to BYU for his mission. He's really good 6'8" wing type of shooter. We'll love to have him. And he's like a 4-year type of guy. That BYU's going to have their high end players, but BYU needs like those 4-year BYU, like just pro that love BYU that want to come in. Players like Dallin Hall, Dawson Baker. Those just like players the players that are like really just program guys for 4 years. So we'll see. If he's on his mission, he's probably he's. Today was P Day, so maybe he found out.
Yeah, maybe he found out.
But I guess that's the fourth piece of why I think the Utah job, besides just being Utah and our rival, is like that's the BYU connections I was thinking about to it.
Cool. No, those are good. Those are good things to be aware of. When you mentioned the Chris Burgess, I thought of the meme where like the kid is holding like the present, the little teddy bear. So just imagine like the kid holding a Utah logo and Jesus just has the BYU head coaching job behind his back. Not trying to be sacrilegious at all, but
classic.
That's what I imagine is. I mean, and really though, I mean, if I was in his position too, I think you just look at the trend of like the way that Utah's kind of like they've honestly kind of chewed up and spit out their last few coaches, despite like even Coach K had not. I only say that because I can't even remember his full name. Kristowicz or
Kristowicz.
Kristowicz. There we go. Not Coach 80K. We'll go with that.
There we go.
I mean, he was decent and he got him in the tournament relatively consistently, and then the party's over and he's gone. So it's just like I was shocked to hear like they fired Craig Smith when he's at first the outlook on Utah this year was like they're gonna suck. They're gonna be worse than their football team.
Yeah,
and they've actually been competitive. So that was kind of surprising. So I mean, I don't know if I would want to start my head coaching career at Utah.
And again, I don't think he'll even get the opportunity to choose. I think Utah will just go in another direction. But I think those are all things to think about. Why I would be surprised if he's the next Utah head coach.
Sweet. Well, we're here for it, and all the same, we're heading in the right direction. BYU's heading up. Things look good. And,
yes, sir.
I feel like this was a good run. We were shooting for 45 minutes. Looks like we're at 53, so we're still within.
We'll keep paring it down 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Last week was an hour.
Speed. Yeah. Well, eventually, we'll just have it down in like 10 minutes. Make it easy for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Cool.
Cool.
Rise and hoop.
Rise and hoop.